Conversation.
Hey, Hyle, please do an episode of The Conversation about how K. Rool escaped to the Northern Hemisphere despite being wanted for the crime of kidnapping Donkey Kong. I need to know how he pulled it off!
Hello, and welcome to The Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Dustin Jackson.
Was that a voice? Was that a silly voice? Or was that...
And I'm Dustin Jackson.
Wow.
We got a wild show. We got a wild show for you today.
Are the holidays treating you well, or are you just losing your mind?
You know what? Holidays have been about 50-50, Hyle.
Yeah.
Christmas itself was great. I got to see family.
Yeah.
It was great. But I was sick the day before. A stomach bug's been going around.
Oh, no.
My whole family. I thought it was food poisoning at first from Jack in the Box, because it immediately hit after I ate Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
But I think it was just the bug that's been grasping our nation.
I was gonna say, you might want to watch out for Jack's box, because you'll get hit immediately afterwards. No, I'm glad, because Jack in the Box is actually a sponsor for this episode. So,
Yeah, that would have sucked.
Yeah, I know. Go eat a Jack in the Box. You'll have violent diarrhea.
Yeah, but if you're into that, if you want to, party, go ahead.
If you want a wet and wild holiday season, go ahead. Just ante up to the bar at Jack in the Box. No. It's been a weird holiday season for me too. I've been under the weather, and of course, whenever you feel a bit unwell these days, you immediately think COVID. So I took a COVID test.
Right.
It was negative, and I didn't get much better. So by the end of the week, I took another COVID test, still negative. So I have I had a touch of something. Of course, I also have chronic fatigue, so I never know when my chronic fatigue is the culprit, or if I've actually contracted some sort of virus. So,
right.
Yeah, so apologies if you're hearing coughing or nasal drip on this episode. We will do our best to keep it in our bodies, but stuff might ooze out, as it often does here on DK Vine's Conversation.
And that's a conversation promise.
Well, hey, we are getting towards the end of the Kongversation's 10th season. Can you believe it? So we've got this episode.
No.
We've got this episode, and we have our annual New Year's forecast episode, which we will be broadcasting live on December 31st. We will be counting down the new year for the UK, the homeland of the DKU, once again. And we will also be giving our thoughts and previews and predictions for 2023, which should be a pretty big year for the DKU. I know we like to hope every year will be a big year for the DKU, but just surface level alone, we're going to have a lot to talk about come April with the Super Mario Brothers movie. So,
Right.
I think it's going to be jam-packed this year ahead. So we'll be getting into all of that. It'll be live on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/DKVine or dkvine.com/Twitch. And we'll be starting probably around 5:40 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:40 p.m. Pacific Time. I don't know, 10:40 p.m. GMT, roughly. I will be announcing this when we're doing it, and you can tune in live on Twitch, or you can listen to the episode later on all of the usual podcast listening avenues of your choice, wherever you listen to the conversation normally. So that will be our season finale, but we got to get through this episode first. Our third DKU Tribunal Special Session of the season. And I promised early on we would be doing these. And here we are with the final one, where we will be getting into Cameo Elements of Power. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll table everything that needs to be said about this when we're actually launching into it. But yeah, this is one that has been demanded of us to reopen it for litigation, for trial, to determine whether or not it is actually part of the DKU or not. Because, since it's come out, we've weighed on the side of no, it's not part of the DKU. But as we've seen earlier this season, sometimes, those earlier rulings can be overruled if more evidence comes to light. And sometimes that evidence comes from things that we didn't know before, or sometimes it comes from circumstances that change, new things that open up, and allowing us to view things in a different light. So we'll get into why we're relitigating Cameo. But first of all, I do want to plug really quickly DK Vine's Mastodon account. Yeah, DK Vine's on Mastodon. DK Vine's on Mastodon. I didn't think through this song.
And you can download that MP3 off. You find the link on our Mastodon.
No. But yes, if you go to Mastodon and you search for DK Vine, or you can, I guess, type in mastodon.sdf.org/@DKVine. It's not very intuitive, this Mastodon, but it is a somewhat reliable Twitter alternative. And so if you want to see DK Vine's tweets, but you don't want to go to Twitter anymore, check us out on Mastodon. Hey, we're also on Hive as well, but that's only available through the mobile app. So you can't browse, on a desktop or on a browser. You have to actually download the app, so it's a little bit less user friendly. But we're also on Hive. Get the same content across all three platforms with Twitter. Of course, we're also on Facebook and Instagram. So DK Vine on social media. Check it out.
Those are great names too. Mastodon and Hive. Both of those could tie into the DKU.
Yeah, I've already made those jokes, Dustin. When I launched the Mastodon account, it was a picture of a snowhorn from off of Star Fox Adventures. When I launched our Hive account, it was a picture of Hive Russell from off of Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I keep it on brand. Hey, Dustin, speaking of the holidays and speaking of plugging things, I just want to give you a special thanks for doing this year's DK Vine holiday card.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
It was magnificent. I loved it. It can be viewed right now on our website, dkvine.com. Patrons, also be checking your mailboxes. You should have already received or should be receiving, depending on your location around this globe, a physical copy of your own card. So, anyway, yeah, Dustin, thank you. It's wonderful. It might be in the running for my favorite DK Vine holiday card. We've been doing this for 10 years now, just like the Kongversation. We've had an annual DK Vine holiday card because we are so inspired by Rare's classic holiday cards. They would do one every year, and it was always just fun to see characters and concepts in that holiday light. And they stopped doing them reliably, or I should say, I don't think they ever stopped doing them. They stopped releasing them to the public.
Right.
And so around 2013, around sort of the darkest ebbs of, the uncertainty for Rare's future and before Platonic was a thing, we were like, hey, we should just carry this torch and we should do our own holiday cards. And then since 2016, we've been mailing them out as well. So anyway, yeah, Dustin, what's your favorite bit off of your holiday card?
That's a good one. Oh man, that's tough. I feel like all of them are my little children, my little babies.
Yeah.
It's a small detail. Very small, but it was very last minute, and I was pretty happy with it. Near the end, I was kind of struggling to figure out what food to get on the plates on the tables. But then at the end of the day, I put one of the little cheeses from Conker on the plate of Karate Kong. And that's the food you would gravitate towards.
Yeah.
That's just such a mismatched pair.
Yeah.
But I like a lot of the other stuff, like being able to draw beebs was fun. You had the idea for Xananeb's spaceship in the back, which was awesome. That's a great idea. I'll be honest, I think this is probably my favorite one I've done, at least. I feel like past DK Vine holiday cards that I've done, I kind of look back on, and I'm like, it's okay. I feel like I probably could have done better. But this one I look at, and I'm like, no, I'm very proud of how this one came out.
I'll tell you my favorite detail. I mean, I like all the details in this card, but this is just such a only on DK Vine sort of touch, where we have, or I should say you have, Bachelor Bear from the Game Boy Advance remake of Donkey Kong Country 3, openly flirting with Viva Pinata's Fanny Franker.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Which, for those who don't know, she is the character with a mailbox over her head.
Yeah, I was kind of struggling to pick a Viva Pinata character. I wanted to give Viva Pinata a little bit of spotlight since I feel like it's one of the DKU games that doesn't really get to be in the spotlight very often.
Sure.
And originally it was just going to be Leafos, but I thought, no, what if I went weirder? What if we went with the mailbox head?
Well, it was apropos because this is a holiday card, and where do you get holiday cards? Your mailbox. So
exactly.
I really enjoyed it. It's all encompassing, this card. It really covers every corner of the DKU. I think the only thing that's arguably untouched is Retro's Donkey Kong Country duology, but we've got a little bit of Payon in there. Obviously the rare era, and then every corner of the DKU from Banjo-Kazooie to Yooka-Laylee gets a little nod in there somewhere.
Wanted to say something about that,
Sure.
about not referencing the retro games. Once the card was finished and put out, I came up with a last-minute bullshit excuse that I pulled out my ass. So in the card, I have Rabid Cranky just eating mushed up bananas. He's an old man. He can't, it just seems like something he would shove in his maw. But what if that mushed up banana was from Donkey Kong Country Returns, where the Tikis are crushing the bananas, huh?
Oh, yeah. It dribbled off of Tiki Tong.
Yeah, and he said, mm-mm.
Yeah. All right, then. You heard it. That's word of God right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
Little DK Vine exclusive.
be sure to follow Dustin's art. What's the best way to follow your art? Just your art, Dustin. Like, not necessarily related to DK Vine, but just Dustin's art in general.
So I actually haven't made the leap from Twitter yet, just because I'm lazy. I probably will in the new year, but Dustin Doodles on Twitter is a place where you can just find everything I post. If that's what you're so into, if you want to do that. If you are not a big Twitter person right now, which is understandable, you can go to Instagram, where I am _flying_Dustman. Get it? Like the flying Dutchman.
Oh, I didn't get that. I just thought, like, you needed a bath.
Yeah, I feel like jokes are better once they've been thoroughly explained.
Well, anyway, it was a lovely holiday card. It honestly is the most stressful part of the season for me, is because you or Cameron or whomever always does the art, right? Like, we usually break it down as a staff. We spitball ideas, but ultimately the artist is the one responsible for pulling it all together, and they have final editorial oversight on it. And then we order them to be manufactured, and then I personally address them and get them out. It's a touch. I read Barack Obama did that in the White House. He personally addressed all of his holiday cards, and I was like, well, if the president can do it, I can do it. So
move over, Mr. President. So
yeah, that's all well and good, but ultimately I'm getting out something like 75 holiday cards altogether. Hand signing all of them, addressing them, getting them out, getting them to the mailbox. And so it is stressful, but once I get that done, it feels really good. I feel like I've done something this holiday season, like, worthy of the title holiday season. Like, okay, I did my part. I got out 75 cards around the world, on, like, across 5 continents. So yeah.
I don't have to do anything now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Mom and Dad. I didn't get you anything.
Sorry, all those cards ain't gonna sign themselves.
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of a cramp in my hand still, but that will pass come January.
Don't worry, we'll smooch it.
All right, here we go, Dustin. So, Cameo. Elements of Power. Now, in the first 2 DKU Tribunal Special Sessions this season, we looked at, well, first, a game that has long been screaming, just shrieking, to be part of the DKU, but wasn't because of some, honestly, in retrospect, very arbitrary hang-ups, but at the time they seemed logical. And all it took to get Saberwolf GBA into the DKU was for the MCU to catch up to the DKU in concepts and us to view Saberwolf in a new light. And we also looked at a game with a plausible character cameo, but no word of God to confirm it. For example, when Lee Loveday confirmed that the goldfish in Viva Pinata was Royston, it cleared it for us. We didn't have to worry about it anymore. But, for Killer Instinct 2013, we had no word of God that the backpack that Rash the Battletoad could wear was, in fact, the Lord of Games. And all we really needed there was a grace period. A period of cooling down where we knew, we could say for sure that no word of God was ever coming on the subject. And then from there, we could just use logic to say, well, obviously that's log.
Yes, sometimes you gotta make the call yourself.
Yeah, so with the third and final special session this season, we have an even more outrageous edge case than those games. Because I feel like Saberwolf is the most obvious one, just ready to be included. Killer Instinct 2013 maybe less obvious, but just more open and shut, like, well, look, that looks like the Lord of Games. We know the Lord of Games disguises himself in video games as characters and objects. He said he did as much in Nuts and Bolts. Why couldn't that be the Lord of Games, knowing what we know through in-universe context? But this game that we're discussing has never had any real deep ties to the Donkey Kong universe as we know it, other than being a rare game. And a rare game with kind of a cartoony bent. So,
yeah,
it's always been that would have been nice, but nothing really more than that, Cameo, Elements of Power, thus far, is the only rare IP that's debuted since the year 2000 that's never become intertwined with the DKU.
Wow.
I mean, that's kind of crazy when you think about it, because you think, oh, there's a bunch of rare franchises that aren't a part of the DKU. But since the year 2000, even games like Kinect Sports have eventually gotten there, or rather Kinect Sports Season 2 and Kinect Sports Rivals. So, Cameo has always sort of shared, in my mind, that same space that Jet Force Gemini inhabits, where it's a game that's announced, and you think it could plausibly be part of the DKU. So you study it, you pore over screenshots and videos before release, hoping that you'll stumble across something. You hope there's going to be something in there to certify it. And then there's really nothing. There's no character appearances. There's nothing substantial, at least. Nothing like Tip Top showing up and just being like, boy howdy, I sure do plumb love fucking, like Tip Top does in Banjo-Tooie, And because remember, DK Vine's understanding of the DKU and granting admittance to it has stricter rules than most shared universes, and especially most fan-driven shared universes. And I feel like I need to explain this. I know a lot of you who listen to the Kongversation on a regular basis, you know all this by heart. But there's always going to be somebody who has discovered the Kongversation for the first time over the holidays. We always get new listeners over the holidays. People are looking for something to listen to while staying at family, or just because they have a lot of downtime on their hands. For those who work, 9 to 5 jobs, who get 2 weeks off every December, they're like, I want something new. And they might say, hey, are there any Donkey Kong podcasts? And then they find this, and then they're like, wait, why are they talking about Cameo, Elements of Power? So the DKU is ostensibly the Rare shared universe. It is the shared universe of Rare games. But it wasn't really built as a thing by Rare until Diddy Kong Racing explicitly made it so. And Diddy Kong Racing debuted Banjo and Conker within the context of being friends of Diddy Kong, who Diddy met on past unseen adventures with Donkey Kong. And, that preemptively made Banjo-Kazooie and Conker Diddy Kong Racing spin-offs, ergo Donkey Kong spin-offs. And so the DKU, as we call it, because it all stems from Donkey Kong, as a running concept, it starts with Donkey Kong Country, the game that gave birth to modern Rare, kicked off that era of Rare that really defined what Rare is to not only the fans, but I would argue people who work there too. I mean, yes, they had success before Donkey Kong Country, but Donkey Kong Country was really what made them a household name among gamers. Yeah. And anyway, so Rare only ever provided loose recognition of the shared universe. And they would do it through various means, but, it wasn't planned out. They didn't have a Kevin Feige like architect working, behind the scenes to make sure everything was consistent. It's like, okay, well, we're going to use this game to introduce this character. They could have gone down that route after Diddy Kong Racing proved so fruitful and successful and hooked so many people like us into this concept. But the closest they had was Lee Loveday, I would argue, because Lee Loveday did do his best to make it all work, especially on the Rare website, the classic Rare website. I remember, for the Conker section, for what was 12 Tales, Conker 64, and Conker's Pocket Tales, that little section, that little hub of the website, he had right there in Conker's bio that he was Diddy's good friend. So it was just kind of baked in there by Lee, but it wasn't something that like the teams were coordinating or anything, or even the stampers for that matter. So because Rare only ever gave it that loose recognition, and then the buyout literally split the shared universe in two between Rare and Nintendo, we have to be very judicious when following these threads. And us being so judicious pisses people off. It's funny because Gibbon, she's always throwing this in my face. She says, Hyle, you make the rules. Just say it's DKU. And I'm like, I follow the rules. I don't make the rules. Okay? The rules guide me, but I can't defy the rules.
Right, you can't just say, oh, Jet Force Gemini, yep, DKU.
We can eventually get there if new evidence or an evolution of thought takes us there, but it has to be a natural process. It has to be inherently true. We can't just say Jet Force Gemini is DKU because I want it to be DKU, and then it's DKU. Yeah. There has to be a concept to this, and I take this very seriously. Like, the integrity of DK Vine really rests upon this very, very strict adherence to the rules. Rules, of course, spelled as King K. Rool, Rools. So, people also get pissed off at me now, though, when I say it's all within the same shared universe, so I can never win. Either I'm going too far or I'm never going far enough.
Yeah, it's weird since this is all just for fun anyway. It's weird whenever I see people on Twitter being like, nope, no, Donkey Kong and Banjo are not in the same universe. You lose.
Right, when...
It's like, well, that's fine. We can say it. Who cares? It's just a for fun thing.
I really think if Diddy Kong Racing ever becomes available again on NSO Plus expansion pack, we will have a lot more new devotees to our way of thinking. I think the biggest problem is Diddy Kong Racing has been in legal limbo for 2 decades. And there just aren't enough people who are truly exposed to how Diddy Kong Racing presented it. They view Diddy Kong Racing as a crossover rather than the way Diddy Kong Racing was in the original light of its release, where, hey, here's this new character Banjo. Hey, here's this new character Conker. Why? They would be fun to follow on their own adventures, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. If you look at, like, the way crossovers are handled, like, nowadays, like, people aren't going, oh yeah, Shovel Knight and Battletoads, those are the same universe.
Yeah. So
I feel like that kind of colors people's opinions a bit, but it's right there in the character bios. It's not a whoa, universe is crossing over. It's contextually, it's saying that, no, these characters are friends in the same universe.
Yeah, contextually, it was that, it wasn't even that, hey, isn't it quirky that we're using these 2 characters who don't even have their games out yet? It was, here's this new Donkey Kong character, Banjo. Here's this new Donkey Kong character, Conker.
Yeah.
And they really were brought up through that connection. And yeah, it was all retroactive developmental-wise, but the way Rare presented it looked seamless. It looked like it was, part of a plan.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have to be very strict when it comes to all of this. And our rule of thumb is that mere references to things do not count as being DKU. And this is where a lot of fans, I think, would part with us. A lot of the fans of younger shared universes who, for them, like, references, that's all you really need is, this reference that a character or an institution or something exists in this universe as well. That's enough for me. They exist in the same world. But for us, the only thing that gets it over that finish line is a physical character appearance. What makes a game series natively DKU, as in every character in that game is therefore granted native DKU status, and then they can make other games DKU. It's when a physical character appears in the first entry of that series. And it all goes back to Banjo and Conker, really. That was the template for how it worked. And, it's grown, it's evolved over time. Grabbed by the Ghoulies was DKU because Royston the Goldfish from off of Banjo-Kazooie appeared in it, just in a minor background cameo, right? Little Easter egg. But it was still physically Royston. He was swimming around. And that started the running joke of Royston just appearing in games and giving them status, DKU status. I mean, it got to the point where we started, making light of it so much that developers would just do it to make it part of the DKU. An example of that is in Connect Sports Season 2. Royston appears in it, and there's the legally dubious but still with authorial intent of Yooka-Laylee, and even Ed Bryan's Goldilocks and Little Bear's storybook app from Nosy Crow. So
this actually ties into, like, one of my only DKU hangups.
Yeah.
So normally I'm totally on board with all this, but the one exception is Viva Pinata, which is DKU anyway, but wasn't the reasoning that the goldfish in Petula's fishbowl was said to be Royston?
Yes, so that actually came via word of God by Lee Loveday. And there's this big argument about Viva Pinata being DKU or not, because it's like Saberwolf GBA, just a game that was screaming to be DKU, but we couldn't find any physical character appearances to really put it over that finish line. And for the longest time, we thought maybe, not the longest time, but in relative terms to this debate, the longest time it was Mr. Ribs, who appeared as part of a house in Viva Pinata. And we were like, is that actually Mr. Ribs? And Lee Loveday said, no, that's just decor made to look like Mr. Ribs. And we were like, damn it! Damn it. And then somebody came back with the goldfish, and Lee said, actually, yes, it is Royston. And you may be wondering, Dustin, well, it's clearly an unused pinata goldfish, and it's not supposed to be just a regular organic flesh and blood goldfish like Royston is. How could that be Royston? And the answer is he's disguised as a pinata.
Right.
He's incognito, probably because, the nightmare that is his existence, always getting cooked and prepared by Banjo's friends. And then, he gets swiped by Baron Von Ghoul and put in a haunted mansion. And so he's, trying out a thing for a time where he's disguising himself as a pinata on Pinata Island.
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's great. I have no issues with. Awesome. However, where the issue comes up for me is there's such a much easier way to say it's the same world, same universe, but it doesn't have that physical character, because in one of the item descriptions, it just straight up says, oh yeah, Kazooie came over from the Ilo Hags and sold Bottle's goggles here. She stole Bottle's goggles and now they're being sold on Pinata Island. And to me, that seemed like a no-brainer. Like, okay, well, that just straight up confirms they're in the same world. But due to DK Vine's rules, it don't count. It has to be a physical character. That's the only time where I've been like, I don't know about that.
Well, here's why we have to be so strict about that, Dustin. A good example that keeps it in-house is, Donkey Kong Country 3. You have this moment where Bizarre Bear is talking to Dixie or Kitty, and he'll mention meeting Link from Link's Awakening. And he says Link was in there last week and was asking about the castle. And eventually he didn't have any bear coins, but they negotiated an exchange rate for rupees and spent 500 rupees, which says to me that inflation in Hyrule is just through the roof. But you could make the argument then, oh, well, clearly Donkey Kong Country 3 is part of the Zelda universe. But nobody would do that, even though Bizarre Bear is saying Link was in this shop last week. So yeah, I
that's
see.
True.
I see what you're saying, and
I can see why it wouldn't fly. You gotta draw some lines in the sand.
Yeah, and once we get that physical character appearance in there, then lines like Kazooie visiting the Isle of Hags, or Captain Black Eye, or Baron Von Ghoul, or Mr. Pants, that's all really bolstered. But you got to get that physical character appearance in there to really solidify that, hey, yes, this is tangibly DKU, because Royston the goldfish is in it, and he first appeared in Banjo-Kazooie with the character Banjo, who first appeared in Diddy Kong Racing.
I totally forgot about that Zelda thing. You're so right, Kyle. You always are.
I mean, I live and breathe this. This isn't just a passing fancy for me. I've been a strict student of this nonsense for a quarter century now. So
I'm just picturing Hyle as like one of those very strict, buttoned up librarians.
Yeah, like Blunder Bear.
Yeah, there's a DKU character.
Got a stupid little spinning bow tie. Or to keep it within the context of tribunal games we discussed this season, Connie Ann from Off of Saberwolf.
Oh, what's tell me about Connie Ann. It's been a while.
She's the librarian.
Right, but I guess I mean, like, in what context is she being brought up right now?
You mentioned librarians.
Oh, you're so right. I thought you were saying like she had a cameo in another game or something.
No. Yeah, actually, yeah. Let's just cut to the chase. I found Connie Ann in Cameo. It's DKU. No,
perfect.
I'm joking. Oh no, I broke Dustin.
Episode over.
Dustin, I'm worried about you. I feel like I feel like you're on death's door. I would hate for this to be your final conversation.
Every time a game has made DKU, more life is siphoned out of me.
Oh no, I take it back. Killer Instinct 2013. It's not DKU. Saberwolf GBA, not DKU.
Yeah. I love it. Apologies, everyone. I'm so sorry. It brings me so much joy, but I really feel it afterwards.
Oh no. Oh, what are we doing here? This whole time I thought we were enriching the world, and really we were just taking life from my friend Dustin.
Oh, don't worry. It's fine. I'll get more somehow.
By the way, it should be pointed out, because you did bring up, the characters physically visiting Pinata Island. It should be pointed out that most of the DKU does take place within this fictional island chain that we dub the Rare Archipelago. Or at least it takes place near the Rare Archipelago. The Donkey Kong series, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Saberwolf, Viva Pinata, Connect Sports Rivals, and arguably Yooka-Laylee all exist within this wide-spanning archipelago. While games...
That's crazy.
Yeah, while games like Grab by the Ghoulies, It's Mr. Pants, and Sea of Thieves take place outside of its boundaries, but are still accessible, because characters from all three games have been confirmed or suggested to have visited the archipelago.
Right.
And then you have Star Fox Adventures, which obviously takes place in the Lilat system, but it does provide us an ancient astronaut-like explanation for the dinosaurs that do live in the Rare Archipelago. And, a game explicitly not set in the Rare Archipelago has no bearing on it being DKU. I just want to make that clear, because a lot of people really get hung up on the shared universe being a place, and it's like, okay, so it has to take place in the Rare Archipelago? Well, no. A game doesn't even have to take place in the same physical dimension for it to be DKU, right?
Right.
It's just a matter of characters and linking back to the origin point, which eventually takes us to Donkey Kong Country. All right, well, now that we got all of that out of the way, why don't we go ahead and play a couple of calls that we got? I announced we were doing this last night, and a couple people called in, wanted to talk about Cameo. So, we're not going to let the calls influence our decision one way or another, but I thought it would be nice to hear what people are thinking, because Cameo is a game we don't talk about here on the Kongversation. It's only come up in passing, so I feel like this really affords some of our listeners who are into Cameo the chance to blab about it. So why don't we let them do that? And Dustin, you can suck on a lozenge while we take this first call.
Everybody wins.
Hey, Hyle and guest. This is Freezer, who is a very rare commenter on the DK Vine forums, but always there on every single piece of social media, just to get a word in. I've been waiting years for you to actually discuss Cameo, even though it's a game I really have no strong feelings about, but it just feels like the kind of thing that should be part of a shared universe, and I hope you backpedal into including it. Same with Jet Force Gemini, but that's a topic for like season 33 or something, when you kind of run out of ways to talk about the same 5 games over and over. I just want to say that while Cameo to me is a pretty forgettable and underwhelming game, it is one that I have a lot of attachment to. It was the first ever HD game I played, and it was when I really learned who Rare were. I played all the Rare games growing up, on the SNES and 64, and even Star Fox Adventures, but I didn't know they were made by the same company. But when I played Cameo, my older brother, who probably sounded like most of the DK Vine forums back then, complained that this wasn't the real Rare, how all the good people left Rare ages ago, and this is just a shallow, hollow remnants of the company it used to be. So yeah, even though I'm not as annoying as my brother, I hope, I still do think of this as a kind of forgettable game, but it is also sentimental to me because it's how I learned who Rare were, and that they made all these games I already loved. I just didn't know they were tied together. So yeah, I've been waiting a while for you to discuss this. This game is obviously DKU. Do not screw this up, Hyle, please.
Oh my god, so much pressure.
Oh man, you better not screw this up.
I feel like that would be a grounds for a mistrial right there. You're just intimidating the jury there. No, thank you for the call, Freezer. I think we're gonna give it a fair hearing here.
Yeah.
In the process of researching this episode, because I don't just do these willy-nilly. I don't just jump in there and be like, let's talk about Cameo. All right, well, I'm sorry, she's a fairy or something, right? She flitters around. I don't see Royston in this. This is not DKU.
She's got like magic or something. I don't
I
know.
don't know why you sound so sinister when you do that voice, Dustin.
She got like that magic.
Oh no. Well, we're gonna give it a fair hearing because ultimately I would love it if it was DKU, but I also have to adhere to our findings, and I can't put my thumb on the scale of justice one way or another.
Yeah, right. Hyle, I have faith in you to be a fair judge.
All right. Thank you, Dustin. You as well. I think you're also of sound legal mind.
That's what I tell myself, yeah.
All right, well, we have another call, and this is one of those double whammies here, because they called in. They didn't get all their thoughts in on the first go-around, so they called back a second time. So, here we go. We're going to play these back-to-back and get the full effect here. You can suck on 2 lozenges for this one, Dustin, and hopefully that
my favorite.
Yeah, hopefully that will soothe your aching Jack-in-the-Box adult throat. Although I guess it wasn't Jack-in-the-Box. That's right. We shouldn't disparage.
It was misplaced blame. I'm sorry, Jack-in-the-Box.
Hello, Kongversation. This is Ryan Haas, the webmaster of the Super Mario Brothers the Movie Archive website, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about, as you know, Cameo, Elements of Power. First-time caller, long time, Rare fan, and DK Vine specifically, purveyor here. Gosh, I'm sure I posted on the forums many years ago. Got into Rare, of course, around the Banjo-Kazooie era and never looked back. So what do I remember about Cameo, Elements of Power? Well, I am interrupted by a dog. So sorry, listeners. So sorry. I'm going to have to be clever with the editing there. But, yeah, I followed the game a long time. It felt like forever. Waiting for Cameo, Elements of Power, being that it was, started development on the N64 and went through the GameCube and the Xbox and the Xbox 360. So it was all wrapped around the Rare buyout era. I felt fine. It felt weird when Rare went to Microsoft, but, I was around the age then, the high school type of age where I was totally fine with that because I was just going to follow Rare wherever they went, and I was going to get whatever console they were making games for. And so I was thrilled. It felt like, after feeling a little lukewarm, of course, grabbed by the ghoulies, I bought it, but never beat it. I was super excited that the Xbox 360 was launching with 2 Rare games, launching with Cameo, Elements of Power, and Perfect Dark Zero. It felt like, oh man, this is a return to the Rare I want. This is going to be like 2 genre, console launching Rare titles. This is excellent. This is what I want. So I vividly remember waiting at Walmart, sitting in line for, I believe, a day and a half when the Xbox 360 launched. And it was back in the day where that was the only way to get a console back then. You didn't have lotteries. You didn't have, Sony Direct lines. You had to go to Walmart and sit down for a day and a half. So I happily did that. And, I got that Xbox 360. I had a TV that had an HDMI port. It felt so crazy to... Hey, it's Ryan Haas again. Brevity is the key, I suppose, in trying to get the messages through. So here we go. So got the Xbox 360, Perfect Dark Zero, and Cameo on launch day. Cameo is definitely the game that I have the most fond memories about. I never did complete Perfect Dark Zero. I actually couldn't get past the first 2 stages, I think. But Cameo I've been looking forward to ever since it was first announced, and so it was a long time coming. It felt similar to Star Fox Adventures in terms of tracking the development of it for so long through the internet, and finally getting this game to finally see like what came out of this long development. And I remember at the time really just feeling super blown away by it. I thought it looked amazing. It was like the first HD game I had ever played. Ooh, normal maps. What is that? Like, that's when I first started to even know what some of these graphics terms even meant. But I remember the visuals stick out, the sections where you're on the horse and driving through all these, it felt like swarms of enemies at the time. Like, how are they doing this? This looks technologically amazing. Wow, like this is the wave of the future here. So I remember playing the heck out of it when it first came out and beat it, and have really fond memories of that time, but I have never revisited the game. And, it's not something like Star Fox Adventures where I will play it every 2 to 3 years. So I'm curious to see, like, I now that it's on Rare Replay and I've got the Series X, I'm hoping that I can return to it at some point, maybe listen to some of the Chris Alcott developer commentaries, but very curious to see what you all on the Kongversation are saying about the game, because I'm sure revisiting it, I feel like it's going to hold up fairly well, if not feel a little shallow compared to some of Rare's other mainstays. So thanks for doing this podcast.
Well, thank you for the calls, Ryan. And hey, the Super Mario Brothers movie archive. It can be found at smbmovie.com. Of course, referring to the original live action 1993 cyberpunk fantasy Super Mario Brothers. The internet's a small place, is it not? Just here we are talking about cameo elements of power, and we get Ryan from off of the Super Mario Brothers the movie archive calling in.
What are the odds?
You just don't expect. We're not talking about Mario today. We're not in that wavelength. But he's got some thoughts on Cameo. Why not?
Right. Hyle, do you mind if I'm like mean for a second? Not to our caller, of course, but I feel very bad for anyone who waited in line for a day and a half and got Perfect Dark Zero.
Yeah, I was thinking about my own experience because, I still don't have an Xbox Series X. I don't know when I'm going to be able to get one. But back in the day, I got an Xbox 360 on launch. And part of that was, we have Rare games at launch. I want to support Rare. I'm going to go all in on the 360. It's going to be my console of choice. And of course, it ended up, red ringing twice until I got the newer model late in its life. But I remember going to GameStop for its midnight release, and I was like the only person there with Rare games. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, because I really enjoyed Cameo, but boy, I was going through Rare Replay trying to get all those stamps, and I did. I was victorious in that goal, but man, Perfect Dark Zero really puts a bitter taste in your mouth when you have to play it for the achievements.
It's more like Perfect Dark Zero calories. It doesn't have any taste.
That's so right.
No, I think even people at Rare would say, not the strongest effort, Perfect Dark Zero.
I don't blame anyone involved. Just sometimes things just happen.
Yeah. Cameo, I mean, say what you will about Cameo. I think it looks gorgeous. I love the art direction. I love the style. I love the music, the sound. I mean, it's got a nice aesthetic to it that feels very much of 2005, but it still has that rare polish to it that makes a game like Star Fox Adventures stand out to this day. We're like, oh, that looks pretty cool. I really like the cartoony realism of it all.
Yeah, totally agreed. I really do associate Cameo with the 360, mainly because it's a game on there, but like, when it first came out, it was the game in like all of the demo kiosks I saw, and I was just like, oh, I get to, like, I couldn't afford a 360. I can't buy one to support Rare as much as I want to. So it was nice just being able to play Cameo when I could.
Yeah, it's weird how I'm more poor now than I was back then. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm a Donkey Kong journalist now. But yeah. As mentioned, Cameo is the only new Rare IP to launch post 2000 to not be part of the DKU, at least thus far, in any shape or form. Actually, since Diddy Kong Racing in 1997, for the past 25 years, there have only been 3 new Rare IPs that have somehow escaped the DKU's reach. And that's Jet Force Gemini, Perfect Dark, and Cameo Elements of Power. You can make a case for a 4th in Rare's Mickey Mouse series, Mickey Speedway USA or whatever. But if we don't include that, then it's just 3. And
right.
Again, that doesn't mean that characters from those games don't necessarily exist in the same world, or that you can't have crossovers between them. Because indeed, Joanna Dark did make an appearance of sorts in Kinect Sports Rivals alongside Mumbo Jumbo, sort of. And Juno, Vela, Joanna, and Cameo were on the Rare Limited team, along with Banjo-Kazooie, Conker, Saberman, Rash, and a Fudgehog in hashtag IDARB. So, it just doesn't make them natively DKU, part of the same ever-expanding web of games that began with Donkey Kong Country. And as a side note, because this is all very confusing, and I recognize how confusing it is, you need a law degree for real to understand half this shit. Remember that Saberman and the Battletoads, along with Sir Arthur Pendragon, who appears in Sea of Thieves, predate the DKU and predate Rare playing around with the concept of a shared universe. The whole reason Saberwolf GBA got in earlier this year was through the logic of taking a pre-existing character and re-debuting them within the context of the shared universe. Saberman was reinvented in a very similar fashion to the Kongs being reinvented in Donkey Kong Country. You take a character and you make a new form of that character as the DKU version of the character, while still loosely acknowledging their past history that predates that. So, anyway, I just want to be clear there. So, yeah, as Ryan said, Cameo was part of that early GameCube Rare vintage, alongside games like Star Fox Adventures, Grab by the Ghoulies, and Donkey Kong Racing. We knew the name Cameo before we knew any context about what it was going to be. And so, of course, at DK Vine, very early DK Vine, we thought Cameo inferred this amazing game that mashed up numerous Rare characters and properties together. Cameo. Oh, who's going to cameo in Cameo?
It could be anyone.
Fun conversation fact, Dustin. Hashtag IDARB is a Cameo game.
Oh, no way. You came up with that all by yourself, Hyle Russell? A Cameo game?
A Cameo game. So, early on, up until release, there was always this sense that Cameo it could very well belong to the DKU. Even if there was no evidence it would have any actual character appearances. You know, we were all watching it up until release. You know, like, we play this game with so many rare titles, and, you know, even platonic friends titles like Lil Gator Game, which just saw release. We were keeping an eye on that because it was like, you know, Lil Gator Game, that looks like it would be perfect for the DKU. We have to see if there's going to be any character appearances, and so far we have found 0 in Little Gator Game. Unfortunately, because Little Gator Game is just so charming and wholesome, and I love it so much. But
right, I understand them wanting it to be its own thing, but sure would have done us some favors.
Yeah, right. Like, what I like is when there's a wide tapestry of the DKU, and I love that you could have a game like a Little Gator Game on one side and Conker's Bad Fur Day on the other. It's just wonderful. But yeah, you know, part of the problem of a game like Cameo Elements of Power is that there is this remote fantasy realm setting, which sort of, you know, takes a lot of the possibility of character appearances off the table, just inherently makes it hard for anybody to appear. So we're not really going to be getting into the nitty gritty of Cameo, the lore, the characters, the gameplay. We're looking at it just from strictly DKU context, but I feel like we need to understand base level. So yeah, why don't we read the actual story from the Cameo instruction manual, which I feel like will help at least get people up to speed on what Cameo is and where it takes place. And then maybe we could see how that could possibly relate to the DKU.
That's a good idea. Is one of us going to read it out loud, or should we all just kind of read silently at our desks?
Considering this is an audio podcast, I feel like it would be doing everybody but us a disservice if we read it silently. So, because you are having difficulties right now in the throat department, I will volunteer to read it, Dustin.
Hyle, you're a lamb. You are a savior.
Wow. All right. Well, just stick me in the major then. Here we go. Now, I love that it's called The Story So Far. Because the story so far, I believe, was what they used on Rare's website back in the day.
Yeah.
For any game story, because that's what we shamelessly used on DK Vine as well.
I was wondering why it sounded so familiar.
Yes, Story So Far, SSF. Here we go. Trolls, as everyone knows, are nothing but trouble. Long ago, so the tribal elders say, they were welcome inside elfin borders. But while other tribes respected the leadership of King Solon and his elves, the trolls decided that there was more to be said for sheer physical size and aggression than wisdom and magical trickery. And so it was that Thorn, by far the strongest of his generation, rose quickly through the troll ranks to become their own king. Nobody suspected that behind Thorn's impressive size was a mind to match, and he took advantage of this blindness to begin conquering the other tribes. Perhaps King Solon could have seen what was happening, but as fate would have it, he was away on the traditional quest of the elfin royal line, the search for the elemental warriors, living natural forces gifted to the elves in a time long past. Since the day that those warriors were seized by a higher power and scattered to the winds, the elves had been duty-bound to seek out and return them to the pages of the fabled Whatnot book. Whatnot book. Whatnot book.
Whatnot.
Whatnot book. The Whatnot book. The Whatnot book. Solon was even more determined than most since he had inherited the element of power, which granted its wielder the ability to take on the forms of the elemental warriors themselves. Are you following along, Dustin?
Oh, I'm following along all right. No way. He had the elemental warriors themselves?
Yeah, all right. So in time, Solon returned to his kingdom in triumph, where he discovered Thorn's actions and used the power of the warriors to vanquish the Troll King. sending his treacherous race into exile. Sadly, that day would bring curses and blessings in equal measure, as King Solon also vanished in the wake of battle. His fate would be anxiously disputed for years, much like Cameo's DKU status, but nobody could ever say for sure what had happened. History moved on, and Solon's wife, Thena, was left to rule the kingdom with what remained of her family. At least there was peace once more in the tribal lands, and while some said that Thorn had not been killed, merely somehow confined, these doubts were not enough to keep folk from falling back into the simple pleasures of everyday life. Eventually, attention turned to Cameo and Callus, blossoming daughters, of the elfin royal family. All in the kingdom knew that when they reached adulthood, one of these two princesses would claim the throne, the kingdom itself, and the element of power, that which once commanded the elemental warriors and tamed the most infamous troll of all. Surely such things could only bring joy.
That's true, yeah.
So that's a lot to pack in there, Dustin. And I'm just
that's a whole backstory, a whole history.
That's a complicated backstory. Like that's full on fantasy gobbledygook. That's not as like in depth and confusing as Tolkien's Silmarillion or anything, but holy God, like calm down.
It's a lot to cram into 2 instruction manual pages.
Yeah, and I'm terrible at retaining stuff like that. Like I need to see it play out naturally, but right. When you're just going on about tribal lands and you like, oh, long ago and there was this magic and now there's not, and where did this person go? And I'm just, oh, come on.
Get to it already.
But yeah, I mean, it takes place in a traditional like fantasy realm, like not of Earth, like maybe a pocket dimension or a time of a distant past on Earth that no longer resembles any recorded history of our own. So makes character appearances hard. You wouldn't expect Bumper the Badger to show up and be like, I'm Bumper.
I'm here to help out the battle.
Yeah, and that's understandable. And that's the thing about the DKU and the concept of a shared universe. As much as we are game, if George Andreas, who headed up Cameo's development, didn't want to do that, then it's all well within his right to say, nah, I don't want to, shoehorn any connections to this. I want Cameo to stand on its own. Just because it's being made at Rare doesn't mean it has to connect to anything.
Right.
I get that. I understand that. But the thing is, it's more fun for us when it does.
Yeah. I don't give a shit about anyone else.
No, I mean, and here's the thing. There have been many later references to Cameo elements of power within actual DKU games, like certified, without any doubt, DKU games. And Dustin, you and the Idaho crew have been playing quite a bit of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts recently.
Oh, we dabble here and there every week.
And there's references to Cameo Nuts and Bolts. But even before Nuts and Bolts, there was a reference to Cameo in the aforementioned Viva Pinata.
That's right. That's so true.
So within Viva Pinata, and Viva Pinata, of course, heavily associated with what we call the Banjo team, a lot of references to Banjo-Kazooie and Grab by the Ghoulies, and you do get references to other games within Rare, but, it really does feel like a spiritual sibling to Banjo-Kazooie. And so it's always wild to me when we get references to Rare games outside of that sphere. And we do have one item in Viva Pinata that references Cameo.
Ooh.
And those are Cameo wings.
I remember the Cameo wings. I think I had a pinata that had Cameo wings.
Yeah, so let me read you the description of the Cameo wings. from Viva
Looking
Pinata.
forward to it.
So this would be the first, as far as I'm aware, the first reference to Cameo within the DKU, assuming that
I think so.
Assuming that Cameo itself is not DKU, which we are still under
Right.
that operating assumption. So Cameo wings. It says nice-looking elvish princess wings that provided Cameo with a faster way of moving around. Great for not ruining recently polished palace floors too.
Love it, love it. I love everything about these wings.
So here we are. Now, again, we have to clarify that references can't make something DKU, especially retroactively. But we do have little reference to Cameo, the character here, as if she were a real character within the world of Viva Pinata, and thus the DKU.
Mm-hmm.
So just put that in the back of your head. So I said Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts has a reference to Cameo. Did you actually experience this on your most recent stream?
I don't recall if we saw it. I'm sure we saw it on one of our streams. We might have already done it.
Okay. The Whatnot book that was mentioned in the story so far of Cameo appears as an item that needs to be retrieved during one of the Jinjo fetch challenges. And was it the logbox 720?
I think so. That sounds right to me.
Yeah. So like the physical book actually shows up in Nuts and Bolts, which is even more of a tangible connection after the fact. Like, oh, this book from Cameo actually has persevered and survived to the modern day. And granted, Showdown Town is kind of this nebulous realm in and of itself, where like all video games sort of intersect. It's almost like a hub world, a bleed between all video game realms, sort of like Subspace is in Smash. Might even be in Subspace if we're going to break down the cosmology of it all. But anyway, yeah, it's just interesting that it has survived. You know, we talk about books in the DKU, and recently the one book from Yooka-Laylee showed up in Honey, I Joined a Cult, which a little bit different there in that the one book is actually a character. The one book is a living being, which the Whatnot is not, as far as I'm aware.
Well, Ortho the Wizard is in the book.
He's in it?
Yeah, so Ortho the Wizard is a character who was trapped inside the Whatnot book.
Okay.
So whenever he talks frequently throughout Cameo, but also whenever you pause the game, the Whatnot book is that menu, and Ortho will talk to you through the book.
Right, but is he still... Well, it doesn't even matter if he was still in it in Nuts and Bolts, because that would still like not be a DKU character, since Cameo...
Right, since it wasn't the debut.
Right. But it's still interesting.
Yeah.
It just... Having to parse, like, when the book is the living being, or when a character is just trapped in it, where does the character begin, and where does the physical object begin? That's the question. But anyway,
yeah.
Sea of Thieves has references to Cameo, not as much as Banjo-Kazooie or even Conqueror or Killer Instinct or Perfect Dark or Battletoads, but it does have a ship set in Sea of Thieves, which are called the Elemental Power ship set, and so you can have a whole ship decked out in honor of Cameo. And where this gets interesting is the item descriptions for everything. So for the elemental power cannons that you can equip on your ship, the description says, booming like dragon fire, these cannons could blast even the trolls of legend to ash. For the capstan, it says, keep your ship anchored fast and true. With the capstan, it seems to master the elements. So far, these are just paying homage, just like loosely. Cameo. Just.
I remember Cameo.
Yeah, little footloose and fancy-free with the language here. So the hull description says, this beautiful hull cuts through the waves as if imbued with an elemental spirit of the deep blue. The wheel says, may this wheel always steer you towards enchanted places and away from the Badlands.
Ooh, implying that the Badlands are a physical place.
Well, on that note, here is where it really gets interesting with the descriptions. The sails for the standard elemental power sails says, these sails hint at the myth of a flying princess who fought an evil troll. Is it only a fairy tale?
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. For the collector's elemental power sails, which are the same, but they glow a little bit, it says, tales are told of an exotic royal family who lived in a beautiful realm, as vivid as these sails.
Nice. Can I just say, to interrupt real fast, this might be one of my favorite chipsets in Sea of Thieves. I just really enjoy how natural it looks. The colors are very nice. I like how things kind of look like plants. It's great.
Yeah, it has a lot of nice bits to it. It's a shame that I settled that the Dreadfully Evil was going to look like a Virtual Boy because
right.
because none of this really fits. But, I still really like it. So the elemental power figurehead, which is explicitly Cameo, says, this proud figurehead depicts a princess from an old folk story who wielded magical power. So within these descriptions, you're getting, hit over the head that this is an old fairy tale within the world of Rare, the shared universe of the DKU. It's a fairy tale. It's a folk story. But I did like the little notations there, like, but could it be real? So
you don't suppose.
Well, the collector's elemental power figurehead, which again is Cameo, but glowing more, says, a figurehead so striking you could imagine it taking life as the shape-shifting heroine of legend. And
that's true. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. Finally, we have the flag. The flag that you can put at the top of the crow's nest says, inspired by the tale of a fearless heroine and the element of power. It's just a story, right?
Right?
I love the wiggle room there where, within the context of the shared Rare universe, Cameo might just be a fairy tale. Or it might not. So we have, of course, seen Cameo interact with other Rare characters in IDARB. So obviously, Cameo exists as more than just a legend, a fairy tale. She exists in some semblance in this grand multiverse. It's just a matter of, figuring out exactly how that pans out. But I think that from what we can glean from the item descriptions and her appearance in IDARB, no, Cameo actually took place. Cameo actually happened, and it became a fairy tale, but it actually is history, just history that kind of mutated over the centuries, perhaps. And it's already an old fairy tale by the time of Sea of Thieves, which takes place slightly after the Golden Age of piracy. So, it's already sort of in the distant past, which again would make physical character appearances hard, right? If we have something taking place that far in the past that it's already ancient history by the time of Sea of Thieves, well, who's going to show up for that, right?
Bumper, the time-traveling being.
Yeah.
The ancient being.
You have deities like Log, but Log wasn't even invented until Nuts and Bolts. So,
right.
Weirdly, Dustin, in doing research for this episode, I stumbled upon some interesting things. So, Cameo Elements of Power almost got into the DKU the same way It's Mr. Pants got into the DKU. So I don't know if anybody is really aware of this. I wasn't aware of this until earlier today.
I actually was aware of this. I remember this pretty clearly.
Okay. Well, look at Dustin. Dustin knows all. Dustin sees all.
Yeah, not to brag or anything.
You need to share your knowledge before your illness takes you from us. Jot it down. pass it down throughout the ages.
I'll jot down, yes. Cameo, DKU, is it?
Generations from now, people will study it. What does it mean?
What does any of this shit mean?
So if you study the trailer for Grab by the Ghoulies, the Xbox trailer for Grab by the Ghoulies, you will see a brief snippet of the original GameCube era opening of Cameo playing on the screen in the cinema room. So, in Grab by the Ghoulies, when you're in the cinema, you will see like old-timey footage of just skeleton chicanery on the screen. And
Good word.
It was always weird to me because it was just like, what is it? What is this on the screen? You would feel like they would have something a bit more thought out for the cinema, and maybe you would have an Easter egg there or something calling back, or just something a more fun set piece to look at other than just skeletons being silly, because you see skeletons being silly everywhere in Grab by the Ghoulies.
Right, a black and white skeleton silent film.
Right. So originally, it appears in the trailer, we would see the GameCube era opening of Cameo, which, if you don't know what that is, it's an unlockable in Cameo. You can see it in full, but it's Cameo flying around the classic Rareware logo in like this grassy field, and we can compare the Ghoulies trailer with the released original intro to Cameo to confirm they are one and the same. Now, had this been retained in the cinema, it would have been Cameo's first appearance in any physical game.
Ooh.
Right. Now, obviously, like, Cameo did interact with other Rare characters in the Microsoft Buys Rare trailer. Remember, Conqueror, like, drools over her. He's like, oh. But that doesn't count as a game or even a piece of canon media. That was just a fun little thing that was never included on any game disc. But this would have been Cameo's first physical appearance had it made it in. But I would argue that owing to the fact that the Rare logo changed with Grab by the Ghoulies release, and the character of Cameo would also be going through several revisions around this time, it was probably cut at the 11th hour. It was probably a very last minute switch, like, well, let's get that out of there. And what can we put in there? Oh, I guess skeletons. Sure, why not?
Why not? We got plenty of them already.
And I know some of you out there can be like, hold on, that's not the same thing as Mr. Pants on Boggy's television and Banjo-Tooie, because would that even be a physical appearance if she appears on old film? And, the old debate about whether or not Mr. Pants on Boggy's TV was like a live broadcast, I think that's a silly debate, and it's one I'm not really warm to. I feel like...
Yeah, that's the silly part of it.
Okay, but I feel like all that matters is that Mr. Pants' recorded image that conveys that he is a real character, a real person. That's all that really matters. It doesn't need to be live for that to come across. So, like, that's never been part of my philosophy. And now that I am, DK Vine, editor-in-chief, I'm just like, let's just... that part is just excess roughage. We can just lop that part off. It doesn't matter if Mr. Pants Dancing on Boggy's TV was a live broadcast or not. It was a broadcast, and it was recorded footage of Mr. Pants. That was also backed up by the character credits when Lee Loveday got Mr. Pants as his assigned character. So
right, it was a physical appearance at one point.
Yes. So I would argue then that courtesy could then be extended to Cameo in Ghoulhaven Hall. Sadly, it didn't make the cut, and I even looked, like doing research ahead of time. Even pondered, did it make it into the demo disc for Grab by the Ghoulies that was included with the official Xbox magazine? And no, the cinema was not part of that. So
that's too bad.
Sadly, no trace of this exists in any semblance of release for Grab by the Ghoulies, because that would be a fun little argument to make. Would it not? Yes, Cameo. Her first appearance was official Xbox Magazine game disc, December 2003, disc number 25.
Who could forget?
Yeah. But no, that was not to be, sadly. But we came so close.
Right, the episode would be over.
Yeah, we'd be like,
would just have it.
Hey, we have it. Whoops, we missed it back then. So, what of DKU elements within Elements of Power itself? Powerful DKU elements within Elements of Power. Well, there are two. And let's get the most obvious one out of the way. The one I used to promote this episode on social media. The Mumbo Jumbo Pummelweed.
I fucking love Pummelweed, Hyle. He's my boy.
What's a pummelweed, Dustin? For those who aren't well versed in Cameo, what is a pummelweed?
You know what, Hyle? I think I think my throat's feeling a little better, and I could read this if you really want.
Okay.
I'll muster up the courage.
So is this is from the instruction manual then?
Right, yeah. Instruction manuals back in the day sometimes had little character bios. I really missed that. But the one for Pummelweed says, a hot-headed boxer with a long reach and a short temper. Any troll still standing after a combo should watch out as Pummelweed rears up from the earth for the knockout blow.
Pummelweed's a great design. Like that kind of stupid rare design that I love. I don't know how to describe it. It's just so stupid.
It's a good mix of being incredibly stupid but cool at the same time. Like, this is a guy who will fuck you up.
An angry looking plant. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, Pummelweed is one of the elemental warriors that Cameo can morph into. Or at least take on harness the power of and sort of become. She doesn't physically mutate into these. It's more like her aura becomes these things. Is that the best
it's hard
way to
to really
explain?
say. It kind of reminds me of Animal Buddy transformations in DKC 2 and 3.
I think this recently came up. Somebody asked me on social media, and not being an expert in Cameo, I actually took the question to Chris Alcock, who, of course, friend of the show and worked on Cameo. And yeah, I think he said it wasn't like physically transforming into this hideous beast, but more like harnessing their power and sort of, like I said, it's an aura, but a more tangible aura where you just kind of like, they form around you and you're sort of like, or Cameo, she's just sort of like, not inside, but, consumed by their power. I don't know.
Right,
it's magic. Yeah. It's just magic.
Yeah.
But Pummelweed is one of the elemental warriors along with Rubble, with Ash, not to be confused with the retiring protagonist of the Pokemon anime. Deep Blue, not to be confused with the protagonist of Pokemon Blue. Major Ruin, which doesn't sound like an elemental warrior. It sounds like some sort of character from Avatar, not to be confused.
A catastrophic event.
Not to be confused with The Last Airbender, but of course the James Cameron Blue People thing, not to be confused with Deep Blue, not to be confused with the protagonist of Pokemon Blue, not to be confused with Ash, not to be confused with the Elemental Warrior, not to be confused with Rubble.
I'm glad you said that. I was very confused.
We also have 40 Below, the ice monster. We have Snare, another angry plant. We have Chilla, who is a Yeti, which raises some questions if this were to be DKU. We have Flex, which is looks like a one of the like monsters from Grab by the Ghoulies, the dropper monsters that like jump out and like give Cooper a heart attack.
Right, they drop down and Cooper goes, whoa!
Yeah, and you have to press buttons really fast or he strokes out. And then you've got Thermite, which is another fiery beast.
Fun creatures. These are probably my favorite part of Cameo.
Yeah, they kind of, for me, they always blurred together with the creatures from Saberwolf. Because
I could see that.
You just have a lot of overlap, a lot of concepts that just like are obviously shared, especially when you get into elemental powers. You know, there's only so much you can do there. So you do kind of get kind of shared sensibilities. And of course, this is from the same studio from around the same time. But yeah, it was always a weird thing for me when I would see like artwork, one of these, and I wasn't well versed in Saberwolf at the time. And I'd be like, is that Saberwolf or Cameo? I really don't know.
That'd be a fun game show.
Anyway, so those are the elemental warriors, and Pummelweed is the one in question here because there is a Mumbo Jumbo variant of Pummelweed that you get through DLC. And
that's true. That's very true.
This was actually a contest, I believe, that you could submit a design for these skins, and they would pick the ones they liked the best. And this is one that was submitted by Mark Brown from off of the Spriters resource. So
small world.
Yeah, we're just bouncing around the interwebs today. But we got Mark Brown, who in Mark Brown's pitch, and this caused a bit of confusion a couple of years back because Mark shared this on social media and shared the original pitch, and people thought the original pitch actually came from Rare, and they didn't realize that was Mark's proposal. Mark's proposal called it Mumbo Weedo, and it's basically Mumbo Jumbo's head on a pink pummelweed body, and instead of fist, it's got his staff. Like, both ends of his staff are now his fist. So he's got, like, the little skull, whatever. So it looks like his arms are his wands. Or his wand, but it's, like, made double. So, in Mark's description, it said, "It's Mumbo Jumbo, back from Banjo-Kazooie and ready to make some noise. He's used his magical powers to morph into one of Cameo's warriors. Will you use his combat abilities in battle?" So people saw this and they thought this came from Rare, and they said, "This explicitly says it's Mumbo Jumbo back from Banjo-Kazooie and ready to make some noise." But this was never official. What they did make Mumbo Jumbo a pummelweed. So yeah, Mark's proposal won, but the way it's portrayed in game, it's not the way Mark suggested. It is merely Pummelweed adopting the image of Mumbo Jumbo, much in the same way that in, say, Super Mario Maker, you know, your character can take on the appearance of Donkey or Diddy Kong, but they're still fundamentally Mario underneath.
Right.
And I think, like, this was determined as soon as this was added to Cameo. This wasn't even a real big debate on DK Vine. This only came back once Mark shared his proposal on Twitter, and people didn't remember the context for it. And then it became this question, well, why isn't Cameo DKU? It says it's Mumbo. No, it never officially said that. And in fact, Cameo can look like Joanna Dark in this game as well. But
yeah, that doesn't mean this is a perfect Dark game.
No, and it's very clearly just Cameo taking on the appearance of Joanna. So
right.
Yeah, sadly, the Mumbo Jumbo Pummelweed, as close as that gets to a physical character appearance, it is nothing more than a costume. A very convincing magical costume for sure, but not an actual appearance by Mumbo Jumbo, sadly.
Man, we have so many of these instances that come so close, but just don't go far enough.
Yeah. So the other big debate about Banjo-Kazooie and any connections it has with Cameo, within Cameo itself, happened on the DK Vine forum back in the day, and it's related to the fact that if you enter the character Creeper's home, which you can blow up a boulder and enter the house and take a gander around and mess about with the cupboards and stuff. Just really, do a solid B&E job on the joint. You can also turn on the radio. And why there is a radio in this fantasy realm, you got me. You'd think this technology shouldn't exist, but it does. They have radios, apparently, and you can turn on the radio. And what do you hear but the Banjo-Kazooie theme?
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness gracious. So I'm going to play this audio now. Now, keep in mind that this is audio from an in-game radio, so it's going to sound a little tinny. And I'm actually playing it. This is borrowed from Easter Egg Archive from off of YouTube. So thank you for contributing this little audio that we're going to play right now. So
thank you, EEA.
Yeah, so remember, it's going to be a little tinny. You might have to perk up your ears just a bit to hear it all, but I'll play about a minute's worth of it. So, for those who weren't sure, I got that from Easter Egg Archive, and Easter Egg Archive couldn't stand still while that was playing, so they walked around as Cameo and started smashing the fuck out of Creeper's house. So
it's like I was really there.
Yeah, so that's what all the weird grunting noises were in the smashing. It wasn't like anything sexual on my end. I just want to be clear. Nothing sexual
wasn't
was
anything
happening.
Bathroom related.
Yeah. Dustin didn't need a Jack in the Box. So, this was an argument on the DK Vine forum way back, like a decade and a half ago. Maybe even a little bit more contemporary than that. It's been brought up once or twice that the Banjo-Kazooie theme could possibly be a recording of Banjo and Kazooie, and maybe even Tootie and Mumbo, if you want to go that far, playing their instruments. And would that not count the same way that Mr. Pants counts as a physical character appearance in Banjo-Tooie? In fact, Mr. Pants' first actual appearance as a real character. And I dismissed it at the time. I think the entire staff sort of dismissed it at the time. The problem was that it was absent any visual confirmation that it was indeed them. That was indeed Banjo and Kazooie playing it. It was not just a recording of the Banjo-Kazooie theme. And that was honestly my impression. Even when I started to break down this episode, I was like, yeah, we'll talk about the radio thing. Yeah, we'll get through it. But I'm not really moved one way or another.
Right.
But Dustin, when I was breaking down this episode and I was going down this rabbit hole, I realized that thoughts evolve over time. And sometimes, we get something, let's call them building materials, a bit of concrete. And, if we're going down a path and then we find building materials, we can then take those building materials back to an earlier part of the path that was, at the time, impassable, and we can build a bridge. And I don't know where this analogy is going. I'm really lost in it. But my point is that, sometimes what becomes a shut case can then become an open case. Okay, this analogy doesn't work either. What I'm saying is that over time, what is dismissible can later become permissible if evidence in a different game and a different context comes to light, and then you can reapply it back to the earlier thing and say, hey, actually, this later thing means this earlier thing is, in fact, a valid argument. And I wasn't intending to go down this route. Now, I don't know. I was honestly a little bit surprised I got here, but so now we very recently dealt with this whole concept, this whole notion of recorded audio performances of characters.
Right.
And you probably remember, Dustin. I'm sure a lot of our listeners remember, but this came up.
Oh, I remember.
This came up with Yooka-Laylee, and its relation to the DK rap from Donkey Kong 64. So, a brief summary here. The Yooka-Laylee rap was, of course, in real life, co-performed by Chris Sutherland. Chris Sutherland, along with, ironically enough, Cameo's George Andreas. They were the DK rappers behind the DK rap. And they go, huh, you know. So,
right.
While up until Yooka-Laylee's reveal and the long drip of information from that game, we had never really entertained or thought of the DK rappers as genuine characters before. The DK rap now has been referenced within the lore of Donkey Kong itself. Funky Kong mentions a version of it in Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Game Boy Advance. And of course, it's a song in Donkey Konga. So it exists in an in-universe context, as well as just being something silly that plays at the beginning of Donkey Kong 64, and later in Smash Brothers stages. So, when Playtonic, announced that they were doing their own sequel to the DK rap, the Yooka-Laylee rap, and they announced it would be performed by Chris Sutherland, this time with Grant Kirkhope, we thought, well, hey, wait a minute. If the DK rappers were real characters, and we know the DK rap is a real thing within the DKU itself, and that would make the DK rap a real music video that the DK crew arguably recorded after the events of Donkey Kong 64. Well, wouldn't that make Yooka-Laylee a Donkey Kong spin-off if the Yooka-Laylee rap is included in Yooka-Laylee?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so eventually it was all for nothing at the time because the Yooka-Laylee rap was not included in the game, either the base game or any updates. It was only released on YouTube, to our disappointment.
Right.
Now, it didn't matter because Royston was put in the game anyway. Steve Mails actually was the champion behind that one, so thank you, Steve. But
thank you.
The Yooka-Laylee rap was then hidden in Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. The duo can listen to it on a radio. You hear like tuning. If you go underneath the Batship Crazy, underneath the plank, underneath the Batship Crazy, and you stand there and you just don't touch anything, you'll hear them tuning a radio, and then you'll hear them listening to the Yooka-Laylee rap. So
that's crazy. I had no idea about that.
It's a little fun Easter egg in Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair. And
this was a learning episode.
Therefore, that means that Chris Sutherland's DK rapper, who, I guess he split from George Andreas' DK rapper, whoever these characters are within the context of the DKU, they broke up, and Chris Sutherland's DK rapper got a new rapping partner in Grant Kirkhope's DK, or Yooka-Laylee rapper now, I guess. But anyway, so that does count as a physical appearance, albeit oral, of Chris Sutherland's DK rapper. And weirdly, if you go down this rabbit hole, it means that Chris Sutherland's DK rapper is a Donkey Kong character that Playtonic owns, not Nintendo.
This is crazy. This is like absolute insanity. But it's one of my favorite things about DK Vine.
Yeah.
Just finding these little crazy nuggets.
Yeah. So, along the same lines of the DK rap, the DK rap was basically just sort of homaging Banjo-Kazooie's own intro. Banjo-Kazooie also starts with this little musical performance. It's a hoedown between Banjo-Kazooie, Tootie, and Mumbo. And the version that plays in Cameo is a different version of the song. This one, I believe, was done for the Nuts and Bolts trailer, the Banjo is Back trailer. And this was put in it as an Easter egg before the Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts trailer even debuted that later in 2006, I think, at E3. Or slightly before E3, whenever it debuted. This was put in Cameo as like a little like, aha, see if you can find it. And the question then becomes, well, if we follow the DK rapper, Yooka-Laylee rapper train of thought, how do we know that this isn't, at the very least, Banjo or Kazooie, or both, or multiple characters performing this song that just happened to be on the radio? Like, we know Mumbo Jumbo's appearance made its way into Cameo. And yes, Cameo takes place in a fairy tale realm, which, even in the context of Sea of Thieves, seems to have been in the distant past. But if it's in a different realm, if it is outside of the confines of our universe, maybe time works differently there. Maybe it doesn't necessarily flow the same way in accordance with our world. So maybe, this is a magic radio, or maybe all of the surrounding magic is picking up a transmission from another world. Maybe Mumbo's very presence in the hoedown would suggest that, his magic is somehow inadvertently transmitting it into this different realm. And that's the Mumbo connection. I don't know. I mean, I'm just spitballing there, but we don't really have any evidence that it's actually Banjo, right? Well, maybe we should listen to it one more time.
Oh.
So I want you to perk up your ears and just
put those feet up.
Listen to right after it kicks in, right before Cameo herself sighs in this audio clip. She'll sigh very loudly, and that comes right after the part I want you to listen to. Let's play it one more time. Did you hear it?
Oh, I heard it all right.
That's unmistakably Banjo saying, "Guh."
Oh my goodness.
So, Dustin, I walked into this episode, literally, like, I know a lot of people think we probably playing these Tribunal episodes. It's like, oh, well, DK Vine has decided that it's DKU for some reason, and they're going through this whole song and dance to justify it. I went into this episode thinking, well, there's nothing to say it's DKU, but I made a decision from the outset of this season that we were going to give it another hearing. And I was like, nothing's come up, nothing to sway me has really presented itself. So this will be the one out of the 3 episodes we do this season where we say, oh, unfortunately close, but it just didn't make it. Cameo is not DKU.
Right, I was thinking the same. I was thinking, we're going to go in, Cameo's not going to be DKU, there just isn't enough there, and that's that.
And when we, when I pitched this to you, I even said, like, look, I don't think it's going to be DKU, there's nothing that's really come up, but we're going to do it anyway, we'll have fun, it'll be fun talking about Cameo for a change. There's an infamous tweet by noted professional wrestler and casual racist Hulk Hogan that really sums up the way I feel right now. So, Dustin, if you don't know the parlance of professional wrestling has terms like work. So
right.
when you work in professional wrestling, you're working the crowd. You're basically
you want to work them up.
Well, no,
get them excited.
No. It means like you are convincing them like what you're presenting is real. You're basically
Okay.
like when you're going out and you're pretending you're fighting each other and that there's pretend animosity. That is a work. You're working the crowd, basically conning them into thinking what they're seeing is real. Now,
you're selling it to them.
A shoot is when things actually get real in professional wrestling, and real behind the scenes animosities break through and people say things they're not supposed to. And that's called a shoot. Like, oh, we're shooting now. It's a shoot fight. We're actually laying hands on each other.
See, what came to mind first was I thought it's just someone going, shoot.
So, apropos of nothing, like after midnight on the morning of October 16th, 2011, Hulk Hogan tweeted, "Good night, Hulkamaniacs and jabroni marks without a life that don't know it'll work when you work a work and work yourself into a shoot, marks."
Wow, it's powerful words.
Poetic, but I feel called out a little bit after the fact, some 11 years later here, because I feel like I've worked myself into a shoot here, brother, because I went into this episode thinking, no, there's nothing to suggest that Cameo is DKU. And the same arguments that we had back on the DK Vine forum when this whole radio thing came up, they're still going to be the same arguments, right? Maybe that would have been the case 2015 when Rare Replay launched. Maybe that would have been the case in 2017 when Yooka-Laylee launched. But 2019, Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair gave us the DK rapper in Impossible Lair. And of course, that doesn't make it DKU because it was already DKU.
Right.
But that is undeniably an appearance by Chris Sutherland's DK rapper. And all we got was the audio of him rapping about Yooka-Laylee.
Right. Oh my goodness. My little eyes are the size of dinner plates here with this realization.
So if this was just the E3 or the Banjo is Back rendition of the song by Grant Kirkhope, the Banjo-Kazooie theme, I would say, it's not enough to suggest that it's Banjo or Kazooie performing this. At least with the DK rap and the Yooka-Laylee rap, we have lyrics, right? We have those sick rhymes. And yeah, that's true, but we heard Banjo say "gaha."
That's true. The gaha is there.
If this is a recording, it's very much Banjo, at least Banjo, behind it, being picked up by this radio in another realm. Dustin, I think Cameo is DKU.
It's right there in black and white. I went in expecting inconclusive evidence, but it's clear as day.
All right then. Well, there you have it. I guess we're going. I mean, do we make the declaration? I mean, do you have any do you have any objections to this?
I've always been a Cameo stan. I've always enjoyed Cameo, and I would love for it to be part of this big family.
All of the circumstantial evidence, all of the besides the fact things like the Sea of Thieves item descriptions, the appearance of the Whatnot book in Nuts and Bolts, the Cameo wings in Viva Pinata, they alone couldn't make a DKU. But they really helped buoy the case for Cameo, all based on this one lone goddamned gaha on the Creepers radio.
Banjo just single-handedly made a whole game DKU.
I'm going to say it. Cameo Elements of Power is DKU. Oh my god. I even when we started this episode, I wasn't sure. And talking it through with Dustin, my sick dear friend Dustin, I feel like it's a make-a-wish. Like, I feel like I'm visiting a sick child, and their one wish is to make Cameo DKU. And how could I...
Please make Cameo DKU. It would mean ever so much.
Well, how could I say no to you, little boy? Cameo, Elements of Power.
This has been a File 2 production.
¡Qué rico!